Welcome to the Q&A Cafe. Here we are in Georgetown at the Georgetown Club. And wherever you may be watching, I hope in multiple places, so I can freak out our guest even more, Ryan Lizza. Very happy to have him here with us. Ryan is a Georgetowner, so that got you in the door.
Is that a criterion
no,
for
it's not.
being
No,
up?
it's not. But we like it. We like it. But the last month, Bob Woodward was a Georgetowner too, so I've got to break the trend.
Heard of him.
And Ryan writes Politico Playbook. He is also the chief Washington correspondent for Politico and a senior political analyst for CNN. And a resume that I think belies your talents. It's really
Very nice of you.
I mean, these are things I want to talk about, but I want to talk about the news and the news today and writing Playbook. But I think one of the things that I keep coming back constantly reading about you and knowing about you is as such a remarkable, and here's the blowing smoke up here part, but really you're such a remarkable narrative writer. And does Playbook satisfy that?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm sorry for schwitzing, but it's Georgetown in June. And this isn't because, if you're watching on TV, this isn't because of her tough questions yet.
Yeah.
That'll come later. That's a good question. So, yeah, I've done different things in my career. I started in 1998. I got to DC in January of 1998.
Yeah.
I'll remember the week I got here because I was walking to work at the New Republic.
Yeah.
And in the old days, the Washington Post was in this little machine, these little blue machines. You put your money in
Racks.
and took it out.
They're called news racks.
And I'll never forget seeing the Monica Lewinsky headline in the Post. I didn't see it online anywhere.
Right,
I saw it like
98.
walking to work on the thing. And I just always remember like that was my first introduction to politics is the Lewinsky scandal. That's where it all
That's
started.
a good starter.
And sort of dove into that. It was one of the first things I covered. And so I mostly was at magazines from 1998, not exclusively. And so going into the little newsletter world that I started a year and a half ago, very, very different than writing, like, say, a 10,000 word narrative piece.
Right.
But also extremely rewarding on a more continual basis. Here's the difference. When you're doing long form magazine pieces, which I did, and we'll still continue to do at Politico, you spend weeks and weeks, and it's very solitary, right? And the payoff sometimes is huge, right? Mm-hmm. If you have a big piece that breaks a lot of news, really breaks through, everyone's
makes up
talking
for all
about.
the time you put into it.
But sometimes you spend all that time on something and it just kind of like goes out into the world, and
is that all
if
there
it's
is?
not like a killer piece, it can be very frustrating. And so the like work to reward balance is hit and miss.
Yeah.
And so journalists, we have this like addiction. I guess it's like the dopamine hit you get when you report something, write it, send it off into the world, and see the reaction, right?
Absolutely.
Right? That's what it's all about. So people on TV, tend to be a little more narcissistic. They need that every single day. Like you were in the TV business, you know what these people are like. Like they don't want to get off TV ever. They become addicted to it. And writing is the same way. But the addiction is, a lot of it is the reaction. I think that's why so many journalists are addicted to Twitter.
Yeah, I was just going to say
good
this
and
is
bad.
what Twitter is entirely about. But
and so what I love about Playbook is, one, the audience is incredible.
Highly influential.
We describe it as like, the unofficial guide to official Washington, but sometimes internally we talk about it as a village newsletter, right?
I called it tip sheet.
Yeah, call it tip sheet, but it's a newsletter. It's a village newsletter for the most powerful people in America.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's very different than writing for a general interest audience.
Right.
But it's also very rewarding because of the immediate feedback and the level of knowledge of your readers.
And the breadth of it.
Like they're smart. Most of the readers are smarter than me, and they're there are
And you don't have a limit on words, do you?
No, well, we try and we try and keep the.
It's not like
morning,
a magazine piece that's already been given X number of pages, and
no,
you can go.
No, but it's look that newsletter is between 3,000 and 4,000 words every single morning. So that's a lot.
You're basically doing Morning Joe every day, but online.
That's a good way to describe it. Yeah, it is. It's serving a similar audience.
Yeah.
Although now that politics in the last 20 years has exploded and many, many more people are interested in politics,
Yeah.
the audience for Playbook is well beyond the insider DC crowd, right? Because all of you here,
It can be anywhere.
it can be anywhere. So we have that big audience, but they're almost like onlookers. You know what I mean? Like it's a village newsletter. It is for this one
Very
town.
select
Yeah.
audience, this town.
But to go back to the point, the daily grind of it is, can be a lot, but it's very, very rewarding every single day to get up, narrate the news, explain to people what's going on, get inside Congress, get inside White House, and then do it again the next day rather than waiting 2 months.
Well, and I want you to tell us about that, because we wake up to Playbook, but what does Playbook wake up to?
Well,
I mean, how do you even get started? Walk us through, when is your day done and when does your day begin?
that's a great question. People ask this all the time, and I always was curious about this,
Yeah.
watching Playbook from afar. And I have to say, first of all, Mike Allen, who I've known forever,
The creator.
the creator of this, he created an incredible institution.
15 years ago,
Yeah,
right?
he really did create something incredible. And then Robert Albritton and as Politico matured, and they just expanded it into this enormous franchise. We have a podcast, we have videos, we have an afternoon newsletter. There are like 10 different things at Politico that are part of the Playbook brand.
What's under your co-authorship? I mean, what do you have to?
So a morning newsletter that goes out between 6 and 6:30 every morning.
OG Playbook.
OG Playbook. I like that. Afternoon, what we call that AM, but now I'm going to call it OG Playbook. Playbook PM, which goes out before 1 o'clock every day. All right, so the first one is about 3,500 words.
Does that have a deadline?
Yes.
Okay.
We try and get it out the door by 1 p.m. Right. So OG Playbook is 365 days a year. It's the only product at Politico that has no vacation.
That's why there's more than one.
There's a
person
Christmas
doing.
day. There's
there's
365. And then the afternoon edition is 5 days a week. So it's 12 newsletters a week. And then I do a weekly podcast called Playbook Deep Dive.
I love your podcast.
It comes out every Friday morning.
I recommend his podcast.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get you on.
But what's different about the PM Playbook from the earlier one? Is there a concept of how it's supposed to be different?
PM started about 5 years ago, is my understanding, when the fire hose of news in the Trump administration was so strong that one 3,000 to 4,000 word newsletter in the morning wasn't enough, and people, even though they got one at 6:30 a.m., by 1 p.m. there was so much more news that they needed a second catch up. And so the Biden administration is not as interesting and
but
newsy.
The news is. We're kind of back to dealing with news of a multitude of subjects.
That's true. So having said that, we rarely lack for something to write about at 1 p.m.
Yeah.
But basically, it's a light version of Playbook that catches you up on the news of the day.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just, here's what happened since 6:30 a.m.
Yeah.
Other times, if I have...
Do you ever correct in it, or do you correct the initial Playbook?
We do. It's an interesting question, because internally we sort of consider the audience for those two newsletters the same, but the AM newsletter has a bigger audience.
Of course.
So people always want things mentioned
in the earlier
one. That's the one that's got the biggest
audience. Can imagine
audience.
those phone calls and emails when
you
didn't put us in the early one, you put us in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Brian.
Yeah.
No,
there's a lot of that.
I'm sure Playbook brings to your life in that regard a dimension that you didn't have when you were just conventionally writing magazine articles and covering stories, because you've got such a constituency of people who want to be in it. or act like they don't care if they want to be in it, but they really want to be in it.
Yeah, well, you asked very smart questions because you understand the news very well. And
Thank you.
It is very true. I was thinking about this coming over here and how to talk about this because I love doing this newsletter so much more than I liked the lifestyle of just like writing once every few weeks. You know, I realize it takes a lot for me to
uses more of you.
It uses more of you. You're in the mix more, and one of the things I like about Politico is they have an enormous sweep of platforms.
Yeah.
So if you want to write magazine pieces, there is a magazine. If you want to do newslettering, you know, there's plenty of opportunities to do that. If you want to be a beat reporter at the White House or Congress, you can do that. But it is a great, great place to be a magazine writer because you can sort of have, you know, I'm not really writing magazine pieces for them right now, I'm doing the newsletter, but the people who have, on the magazine side, it's a great setup because you have the resources of a traditional newsroom. You know, I think we have 400 reporters in Washington, one of the news reporters all over the country, and pretty soon all over the world. And you don't have that at the kind of fancy highbrow magazines that are based in New York.
Yeah.
When you're covering Washington for those places, you are like a foreign correspondent.
Yeah.
You're in the Capitol on your own without
support,
20 colleagues who are up on the Hill that you can talk to and be like, hey, what's going on in McCarthy's office? Without 20, you know, without a seat at the White House where if you want to go to a briefing, you can
You're
go.
an Emmy of your own little publication.
Yeah, so I tell people all the time, because people ask this question all the time, this is such a strange transition to be in like the, you know, this like daily grind of newslettering after writing long form for so many years. I mean, since really like early 2000s. It's a grind. It takes a lot of work. I don't know if I could do it for a decade, but it's a hell of a lot of fun. How long did Mike do it?
Pretty much, he did it for a long haul.
He started it in 2007, I think. And it was like his internal newsletter to the editors, I believe is the history
I have
of it.
here the copy from the very first Playbook.
Oh yeah, I went back and looked at these when I started.
It says, "Good Monday morning. Welcome to the new edition of the Politico Playbook that's available by automatic email, giving you a handy BlackBerry and Treo-friendly peek at the news driving each day. Look for a Monday dominated by immigration, new signs of peril, religion, Obama hits religious right, and gay marriage. Elizabeth Edwards breaks with her husband." And then Mitt Romney. Then a link to a story on Mitt Romney.
A lot of things different, especially the technology, but some things like not that different.
Some things just do not change.
Because what Mike really was a genius at, and the urgency at the top of Playbook was really his kind of signature style. And you want people to open it and to, even if they just skim it, you want them to be sort of presented with a lot of little presents that they can unwrap from the top to the bottom. And, you know, I don't know if any of you have looked at it really carefully, but it's sort of separated into these three sections, right? So
it's very easy to read on one of these things because I'm still in bed when I read it.
And, a lot of people are,
you know, and I barely awake, and it's just wonderful, you know.
What could we do better?
Huh? What could you do better?
Yeah.
Well, we'll have I can't think of a thing.
We'll solicit questions.
Put Face the Nation in there more often. Working for the home team.
That's fair.
Yeah, but because I mean, in my other world at Face the Nation, I mean, Playbook is this thing at the end of our week where we've got to get our guests in, you know, by a certain time. And since I book all the guests for Face the Nation, I'm like sometimes working with our communications director, and I'm saying, I'm gonna have somebody one more for Playbook. Just tell me when I have to have it by.
I know.
Because everybody wakes up on Friday morning from the other Sunday shows, probably nowhere else, to see what everybody else has on. And Meet the Press always holds theirs back, and which is mingy of them.
I don't have. This is a huge. I didn't realize what
a big deal
what a big soap opera this is.
Huge soap opera.
And we have a pretty big team, and there are two people on our team that take care of all of that. And
they have a lot of power.
If they could write a memoir about the morning shows, and you know.
But it's sweet that you still give us that space, you know, because
And anytime there's a new show on the weekends,
we look down on some of the newer ones.
I know.
I mean,
But some of every streaming show that comes
don't
along.
tell K-Part I said that. But still, I do want to know, when do you wake up or when do you go to bed?
I didn't answer your question. I tend to work late.
Yeah.
So I tend to stay up pretty late, to my editor's great chagrin, and file, in the sort of 11 to 3 a.m. range.
But you have collaborators, so you're not on duty each time, though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it could be.
Yeah.
You're all collaborating, but
all
it might be. I've got to do. Like you traveled out to Wyoming for the primary.
Yeah, I was.
Or not the primary.
One of the goals this year that I've made a priority is what we call Playbook on the road, and I mean one of the things that we have emphasized, the new team that took over this thing last year, is that wherever the political story is, that's where Playbook has to be. And it can't just be a newsletter about Capitol Hill. We have a Capitol Hill newsletter at Politico. We have an incredible Capitol Hill team. And I would say 30 to 50% of the time, what's going on in Capitol Hill, especially in the first year of a new presidency, is extremely important and is the centerpiece of what we're writing about. But we very consciously decided that was not going to be every single day.
Yeah.
And then in a midterm year, you have to be out on the road. And that there were going to be other political stories that broke through, whether it's Trump in Mar-a-Lago. And so if there's one big difference in the new Playbook that started last year, is that it's not just a micro Capitol Hill publication, covering, every time McCarthy ties his shoes. And so, I've been to Nevada just in the last few weeks. Right. Nevada, Arizona, Idaho, Wyoming.
Yeah, Wyoming was particularly interesting. Talk about Wyoming for a moment, because you introduced both in your piece and in the podcast some, because you'd think that Liz Cheney would just own it. She's a legacy. She's, Dick Cheney's daughter. And yet it looks like she won't. And
own what? What do you mean?
Well, that she'll get reelected.
Oh, yeah. It's very little polling in the race. The one poll that's out there has her down by 30 points, but it's by a partisan. It's by the Club for Growth, which has endorsed her opponent. I think most people out there don't think she's ahead. The race will come down to Democratic crossover voting, potentially, right? How many Democrats are there in Wyoming that are going to...
Does she have a following in that group?
She does, but there are local races on the ballot. There's a Democratic primary that day. So if you're in a city or town, some real cities in Wyoming, but if you're in a town...
There's a hitching post.
Yeah.
Sorry, Wyoming.
I love Wyoming.
I do too.
I have nothing bad to say about Wyoming. If you're in a town and you're a Democrat and you want to vote in the local primary, you won't be able to do that if you change your registration to Republican to vote for Cheney. So that's one obstacle. Second obstacle is she's unlikely to... Yeah, she's got almost $10 million in the bank, so maybe she will do this on the sly. But most people out there are saying she can't run the Democratic crossover, get those people to the polls campaign, because it will backfire in a Republican primary. So there has to be some outside groups that come in and do that. And that has to start pretty soon because the primary is in mid-August. So it's pretty tricky. She waited to the last minute to file. I think some people thought maybe she wasn't going to run at all. She has a lot of money in the bank, and Wyoming is a very, very small state.
Yeah,
the universe of voters, even with the Democratic crossover, is not more than like 200,000 to 300,000 people, right? So she's got $10 million she's raised. And she hasn't spent any of it. So the campaign's barely started. So there was a lot of speculation that, wait a second, why isn't she spending all that money? Is she just going to save it and run for president? We'll see.
Well, that brings us back to this week where we've got we've got primaries today. I think California is the one that most people are considering the top one to watch. And then Thursday evening, we have the long-awaited feature film of the January 6th committee.
Feature film, right.
Yeah, well, I mean, because now it's got a network producer.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can tell us about the committee's decision to bring in? They brought in a former president of ABC News to literally, for the Democrats, produce this evening. I think it's very Trumpian of them, but and I wonder if it's because they felt they failed with the Mueller hearings because it didn't have any drama. But what you tell us what you know about it.
I think it's an acknowledgement that in 2022, to make the case and to explain something to the American people, you have to use all the tools of modern media and not just put out they'll also do this, but not just put out a standard research report with the narrative, right?
We got to look like Euphoria. I mean, I'm just wondering what the goal is here.
I think it's to capture the public's attention because
they're going to have videos, they're going to have live. I don't think they have any animation that I know of. But.
I don't. Right, with some but I think they needed someone with technical and TV skills.
Do they have a host?
I don't know. I don't. I think I think.
I guess it's Benny Thompson.
Benny Thompson and Liz and Cheney will be the chair and vice chair will be the hosts, and I think it's like they know this is not the top issue. Democrats have been doing tons and tons of research and polling about whether January 6th and the return of Trump and the return of MAGA Republicans can nationalize the election and get Biden out from the trouble he's under. And I've watched a number of these focus groups that the Democrats are doing exactly on this issue, and it's not working. It's not what people. It doesn't affect people day to day. Obviously, people think it's something that happened last year. A lot of people are getting crushed by inflation because it's taking away any
COVID's
raises.
Still out there.
And so I think it's their one chance to try and
get an audience.
Get normal people who can't pay attention to politics all the time to pay attention to this.
Is it one night only that it's going to get the prime time?
They haven't announced
extravaganza.
I don't know. I think there's a chance it may be more. They haven't announced the schedule.
It's a lot to get the networks to give you prime time. You have to put on a really good show to get them to.
I believe I think every network has announced that they will be taking it live with one exception.
I have a lifeline over here. Is every network carrying it live?
With one exception.
Yeah. With what? Fox?
Fox News Channel is not taking it live, but Fox Business will have it live.
Because it's such a big business story.
Yeah. Fox News Channel will have its normal primetime lineup. And
but
it will dip
ABC,
into the
CBS, NBC, CNN, and MSNBC will put it on their main networks.
That was what was reported yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fox is the last one to not announce, and they finally announced yesterday, and they said,
all it needs is a red carpet.
Well, yeah.
I don't know what the end game is. Have you heard whether it's going to deliver or be anticlimactic? I've heard both.
If you look on Sunday at the number of January 6th related politicians who are out talking about it, including the former the former Congressman Denver Riggleman. Who was the advisor who's kind of gone rogue now and is out there talking about the committee.
I know a lot about Denver Riggleman.
Oh, really? Oh, we got to talk after.
You do too.
I don't know that much about him, to be honest, but it's interesting what he's doing.
He ran against a friend of mine for Congress. Back.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it was an interesting race.
Huh. Well, he's really in the doghouse with the January 6th committee.
Yes, apparently so. But I mean, I have theories about lots of Washington types. That it's just. I think he's a type, and we'll see where this goes.
All right, we're going to talk after. I don't know anything about him, so to be totally honest.
But he's a type.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't be Washington if we,
Is it that he likes the attention of having this kind of secret and?
Well, I think and I don't ever fault people for being on TV because I wouldn't have a paycheck if it was other.
Yeah.
But I mean, my favorites are the people I have to talk into doing it when it's the last thing in the world they want to do.
Why is that?
Well, because it's the sport. You know, if it's easy, what's the fun for me? You know.
So you have to play hard to get.
I love hard to get. Yeah, I really do. But then I got to win in the end. So, but anyway, that was another thing altogether. But
now I know how to advise people to pitch stuff to your show.
Yeah,
but send an email said I would never do your show.
No. They have to be easy because I have bosses I have to answer to. Will you go up there for this?
No, I'm not going to go up there for it.
Do you go anywhere, or do you find? No, wait. No, I mean this. I mean this honorably, because I think when you get into a kind of a thing like you're doing, it becomes less practical to go to lunch or to go up to the hill and walk around, because you're dealing with so much incoming that I could see you working from home, and then maybe selectively. You can't go to every party you're invited to. You've got to like.
And then when I tried that, I got COVID recently. So
which party was that?
Well, White House Correspondent.
Of course.
Weekend.
Right. Yeah,
Ed's fault over there.
I think tonight we will have an interesting party happening here in Georgetown, the book party for Kellyanne Conway.
At Cafe Milano.
Yes, because it'll be.
Anyone going to that?
All of us. But I mean, it's just going to be interesting to see.
Francesca's shaking her head.
It's going to be interesting to see who shows up, right?
Yes.
I mean, there's a tea leaf component to that.
I was invited, and I didn't RSVP it. Do you think I should go?
I think they'll still let you in.
But do you think I should go?
Well, this is what I want to ask you, is that, because you wrote so eloquently about the Washington social scene. I mean, you kind of put a scholarly spin on it for Esquire. I mean, it was really a smart piece. And it was at a time when I myself was just coming off doing a lot of coverage of that scene. And I was so glad I didn't have to do the Trump era, because the city did splinter. It did all change. And I don't know that it's changed back yet. But there's an exuberance to change back, but I don't know if it's really there. Yeah. I think the will is there. I don't know if it's there. But so I think for you, I'm always curious, well, how do they choose a party just because a publicist has said we had this party and who was there? Or do you choose a party because this is going to say something about the city right now?
I wish I could say it's as intentional and thought out as that. We do cover the social scene in Washington in Playbook, and it's part of our mandate of being a village newsletter. Mm-hmm. And an increasingly important part, like we have two new reporters that work with us who we're going to basically just send out to these kinds of events. Mm-hmm. And every Monday now we have a meeting to look at the calendar of the week ahead and like, okay, where should Bethany and Satota, their names, or one of the authors, where should they go, and what should we, who should we be writing about? And so it is an important part of it. And what was the question?
How you decide what parties to cover, and does any real evaluation of its relevance go into?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's like because there's going to be a very big Democratic event on Thursday, the same night as the January 6th. It's literally just called The Party. And
so it's a watch party.
It's not a watch party.
It's not a watch, but it's the Democrats.
As far as my understanding, it was scheduled long before the January 6th.
Because I know that the GOP, the Trump world, is planning some kind of
counter programming.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the Democrats have a big, essentially a big fundraising event on Thursday.
Bet there'll be TVs there.
I don't know. This is something I'm trying to figure out. It's actually kind of an interesting story.
Yeah, okay.
Probably shouldn't be talking about it.
No, well, we're all gonna read. So
yeah,
I don't think there's anybody
that's
here
a target.
stealing your idea.
So that's a target. The Kellyanne thing is a target. That's going to be an interesting event. So I'm sure. I don't know if I'm going to go, but I'm sure one of us. We have a big.
You'll have what would you call them? Correspondents, among the guest list.
Yeah.
Spies.
Yeah, some poor new reporter who has never covered the Trump world and can walk into that scene.
But speaking of Trump, I'm very curious to talk about, since you are good at kind of mapping the city, how will it change after the midterm elections? Do you have a forecast you believe in right now for the midterms? Or are you still kind of wait and see? Do you think that it's not definite anything, that it'll turn, to the Republicans in the House, or do you think it will? And if it does,
I mean, if there's, I sort of left. I'm not very high on predictions after 2016.
But you're certainly able to talk about what would be different.
Yeah, but look, having said that, though, if there is one thing in politics that is almost like physics, it is that the party controlling the White House suffers pretty significant losses in the first midterm. It was a long, a lot of political science. As a professor in college used to say, any of the sciences that have to call themselves science are probably not sciences. Social science, political science, but physics and biology. They don't add, they don't add the word science. But this, that's a pretty good rule, right? The public turns against the party in power in the first midterm. All of the historical measures that we have look like a very, very serious drubbing for Biden. So I would venture to say it's going to be on the higher end of the estimates rather than the lower end of the estimates right now.
So what this could
30,
mean,
40.
You hear various factions in the House saying that when we get the House, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to impeach Biden.
Yeah.
Now, there are people who are serious about pursuing that, which just as an American citizen, I'm like, could we just maybe work on something that's going to affect the citizenry?
Yeah.
But there is a reason to believe that this kind of nonsense, I mean, that's my personal view, but then could overtake the House, and we're nowhere. And now I don't know what would happen in the Senate because it's so practically there right now anyway.
Well, look, the Senate is not going to turn over. The Senate's a little different. The Democrats have a decent chance of perhaps holding it, but I don't think anyone thinks there's going to be a 2/3 majority in the Senate after the midterms. So President Biden is not. Maybe the House will do something silly and impeach him, but it's in the Senate. Obviously, nothing's going to happen. Yeah. So it would be a completely futile exercise, right? And
but that wouldn't stop the House.
That would not necessarily stop the House, and we've seen this movie before in 1998, 99, and which incidentally, 1998 was a midterm that did not fit the pattern we just talked about. It was one of two exceptions in the last 30 years where the president's party actually gained in the House, and the general explanation for that is the public turned against the Republicans.
What they were doing.
Impeaching Clinton.
Yeah.
The country's a lot more polarized now. The media is much different. So I don't know if that dynamic is even possible anymore. And the gerrymandering has changed things. But
it's hard to keep up with the gerrymandering that is going into this particular phase of the midterms too. I can't, every day I'm picking up something and reading, well, this guy's running here who used to be there, and now he lost, or she lost her district, and I'm like...
It's very confusing. I have the same problem, like explaining that in a macro way is very hard.
Yeah, no, so I just try to avoid it.
And the story has changed at the end here, because the story a few months ago was really all about how the Democrats have done better than expected in redistricting. There have been some changes.
That may be their only hope.
Yeah, but there have been. But now there have been some court cases and some changes in Florida and New York that have changed that narrative.
It's funny when you think this is really only months away.
It's only months away, and I don't remember.
And then we're going to be into the 24.
I'm going to be into. We're already into that because there's some indications that Donald Trump might declare before the midterms rather than after, which is the traditional time.
So what will DeSantis do if Trump declares?
I think he'll run.
So he'll just not let. Yeah.
I think he'll run and they'll fight it out. I think he's. That's very
interesting.
And
that's probably a good thing. I mean, it's probably better that there's competition than.
Yeah, it's probably.
Regardless of what you think of either candidate, we have Trump have competition. Will anybody else jump in?
I think so. I think you'll see candidate. I think Liz Cheney will think about it. I think our governor over here in Maryland, Larry Hogan, is going to think seriously about it.
Yeah.
Ben Sass.
But they all have to get in when? I mean, what do you think is the timetable?
There are different theories. You know, if you want to be the bigger, you know, remember Trump announced his reelection
Yes,
on like Inauguration Day and filed with the FEC. But I think most candidates will create their committees after the midterms in early 2023.
Are there going to be any end runs on Biden, do you think?
It's a great question. Right now, I don't see a candidate out there where it would make sense, financially or otherwise, that they would have a shot. I will say, if there is, I mean, one good predictor of presidents who had either tough re-elections or lost the re-election is, did they have a primary? You know, George H.W. Bush always thought that Pat Buchanan cost him, was a very serious reason that he lost re-election, was because he had to fight off Pat Buchanan in the Republican primaries. He didn't have a clean nomination victory. So if someone like, and you know, obviously, if you go after Biden, you're going to go after him from the left. And so if there was a Bernie Sanders-like candidate who did that, what would probably happen would probably ensure that Biden's not reelected president.
Yeah.
Because the last thing Biden wants to do is fight off a challenge from the left when he's trying to, you know, engineer his general election campaign.
The hard thing for me is having presidents who are older than I am. You know, I mean, really, because I'm old. And I had to adjust to having pilots and doctors who were younger, but I adjusted. But I wonder how much longer can we?
This is such a great point. So the older you get covering politics, or you know, there's a point at which you suddenly realize the people you are covering are younger than you.
Yeah, and they have this power.
I'm 47, so this started to happen to me in the last, you know, people in their, you know, like, holy shit, people in their 40s running for president. and especially people who are like kind of like you, like, you know, I always joke, like, I probably shouldn't say this, but like Beto O'Rourke, who's this, like, I think he's about my age, this kind of like Gen X guy who's like into the kind of same bands I'm into. And I'm like, this guy can't run for president. How's this guy can't run for governor?
He hasn't been too good at it.
I would never trust me to be in one of these positions. And I remember in the Clinton days, the Clinton administration had a theory about the Washington press and why the Washington press was so tough on him and hated him. And it was, you know, there was this argument that all of the baby boomers that grew up in the Clinton generation just didn't respect him, right? That he was too much like them. And so they you know, they were just like, you know, I know too much about what this generation was like. So in all seriousness, though, it changes the way you cover things, right? Yeah. I'm both like more impressed with people who are in their early 40s and are genuinely like ready to be president or think they are, because you know, because you start comparing them to yourself and your own generation. But it definitely it's like a confrontation with your mortality as well. Are
you going to write your book?
I am.
What happened?
Yeah. It's our book. It's
did it get waylaid by COVID, or what was the?
It's a little more complicated than that, but we have very, very generous and patient publishers.
Yeah, Simon and Schuster, or
it's an imprint of Simon and Schuster.
Yeah. But have you? It was going to be a Trump 2020 book, right? Initially. Way back?
No, it was never going to be a Trump. It was never going to be a Trump.
A 2020 book.
But it was going to be a book about this political era.
Yeah.
And it still is.
But
it's going to be.
But you're massaging it into something more, I imagine.
Let's just say there's no pub date right now.
Right.
Yeah. So and it's a little bit of a longer term project right now.
And you're writing it with.
I'm writing with Olivia Nuzzi
and roommate. And more. Your roommate and more.
Yes.
I had something here. No, this isn't about Olivia, don't worry. I had something here I wanted to share with you before. We only have a couple minutes left. And I thought it was
Olivia was going to come, and she sends her regrets.
She was going to come.
She's closing a very interesting piece for New York Mag.
Okay, there are two things I read. One was something you wrote about Tucker Carlson.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh God.
Washington. It was in your piece about Washington. I don't know. It was about Tucker Carlson. You said Washington has never been like that. This is Tucker Carlson talking, and he said, not in the 35 years I've been here. This is Tucker. Political disputes were never personal after hours. Even at the height of the Clinton impeachment drama, people didn't yell at each other at dinner parties. You didn't choose your friends by partisan affiliation. Now you do. It's awful. And this was like in 2019.
That was in the Esquire piece.
Yeah. And I thought, oh, Tucker.
Yeah,
Tucker,
he's had quite a journey.
He did this once. He did the Q&A cafe when I was still doing it at Nathan's, because he'd been on Dancing with the Stars.
I forgot about that. Yeah. I mean, I've known him since the 90s, when he was a great magazine writer. He really was.
He's been a lot of things.
He's been a lot of things. He's had a very...
this is the most profitable.
I would imagine more so than writing for Tina Brown's Talk, although that was probably
being the brand Tucker Carlson, as long as it lasts, is very lucrative. So I found also in your past that this was like, I think when you were in one of your first jobs, you wrote a quiz to test your knowledge, right? Okay, and it just... This is from... Oh, 2005, 2004? It's like when you were starting out in San Francisco.
No, this is 1997.
Okay, even better.
I don't know how you found this.
But I love it because it's like
on the internet.
Again, in the sense that we're in a time-space continuum and everything that just keeps moving around. So this is test your knowledge. The National Rifle Association has supported a ban on the import of Saturday night specials. True, false. In the United States, there are more gun dealers than McDonald's restaurants. True, false. Firearms are among the most strictly regulated consumers products in the U.S. Blah, blah, blah. It goes on, and it's all guns.
This is probably, I can't believe you found this. This is probably the first thing that I ever wrote.
I'm going to give it to you. You can
No, I haven't. I've seen it. It's still online.
You could probably run it today, and it would
wouldn't
be
change. Yeah,
it wouldn't
absolutely
change.
True. Absolutely true. So I went to UC Berkeley, and one of my first journalism internships was at a place called the Center for Investigative Reporting.
Yeah.
It still exists today. Great organization. And back in those days, they were mostly doing co-productions with Frontline on PBS. And I loved Frontline. I really wanted to work at Frontline. And so I was very excited to work on this documentary. And it was called Hot Guns. And it was a really interesting documentary that followed the story of 3 guns from the crime scene. I think they were all used in murders, back through the chain of custody. And they all were from one factory in Southern California that had very lax security, and crates and crates of their very cheaply made Saturday night specials were stolen and ended up in crimes all over the country. And so we told that story by telling the story of 3 of these stolen guns, and worked with this ATF agent that traced them all. And I was an intern. And when the show finally aired, suddenly it was like, oh, there's this thing called the internet. We should. I kid. It was
related to email.
1997. Internet was obviously a bigger. It had taken off by then. And they asked me to help design the website for this documentary and make a quiz. Even back then, it was all about interaction, getting people to...
Oh, yeah.
And the great story is that documentary won an Emmy. And so I got a little, Emmy certificates.
Right.
Yeah. So you probably have a dozen of those.
But
I was an intern, so that was a big deal.
You didn't go into TV.
I didn't. I didn't go into TV.
Should be proud of yourself.
Yeah, a little bit of TV.
But you get on TV. Yeah, you go on TV.
Yeah. But I would never do your show, so don't ask me.
CNN wouldn't let you.
No, they would. But I know you do.
When your book comes out. Okay, I'm booking you right now.
No, I'm sorry.
You don't want to come on? Come on, I'll keep trying. Tell me where you live.
All right, I'll consider it.
I'll be back to you on that.
All right, I'll do it.
Okay, well, let's talk in 3 years.
5.
Well, on that note, thank you all very much for being here today. Thank you, Ryan. It's great.
Thank you for doing this. I'm very glad.
I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Very much so.
And everybody read Politico, subscribe to it. You'll get a little email in the morning so that when you wake up in the morning, at the top of your inbox will be Politico Playbook, and all you have to do is click on it. And his podcast is great too. I'm a
Every
podcast
Friday,
feed.
please listen.
Yes, thank you.
Playbook Deep Dive.
Take
Thank you
care,
for doing
everyone.
this. Thanks, guys.
See you soon.
Thank you very much.
All right.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.